Hello students, welcome to my online classes. From this video onwards, I am starting the second important and interesting lesson, biological classification. This lesson, biological classification, is continuation of the first lesson, the living world. In the previous lesson, the living world, we have studied that on this earth there are wide varieties of living organisms which we call it as a biodiversity. We have also studied the need of taxonomy. Contributions of Carolus Linnaeus, his method of naming of organisms called binomial nomenclature, and his method of classification of organisms into different categories or taxons called hierarchy. In this lesson, biological classification, we shall study the 5 kingdom classification of life on earth. The 5 kingdoms are the Monera, the Protista, fungi or mycota, plantae and animalia. We shall also study the general characteristics of these kingdoms and various types of organisms that fall in these 5 kingdoms. From ancient days, it was the interest of the man for classification of life on earth. And he understood during early days, classification of living organisms on earth is not possible in a single stage. And study of all organisms togetherly is also not possible. Classification of organisms or biological classification started from the efforts of Aristotle. Followed by Carolus Linnaeus, Bentham and Hooker, and finally R.H. Whittaker's 5 kingdom classification. Gradually we are seeing there is a change in the evolution of the classification methods. Starting with 2 kingdom classification, 3 kingdom classification, 4 kingdom classification, and ultimately 5 kingdom classification. In the early days, from Aristotle to Carolus Linnaeus, life on earth was classified into 2 kingdoms, plant kingdom, animal kingdom, because man was not aware of presence of microorganisms. Microscope was not invented yet. Only after the invention of microscope, he understood the presence of unicellular organisms. There are wide varieties of microorganisms. Then another kingdom was introduced, Protista. As the advancement of technology resulted in more and more powerful microscopes, minute and minute microorganisms start appearing. Scientists discovered there are unicellular organisms without even nucleus. That is, there are prokaryotic organisms also. which are totally different from the rest of the organisms on earth. For example, bacteria. Henceforth, the kingdom Monera was introduced. The last kingdom to be introduced was kingdom Mycota or fungi. There was a confusion where to introduce it. Previously they were introduced in plant kingdom. Later they were introduced into Protista. But only R.H. Whittaker gave them the status of a different independent kingdom, resulted in 5 kingdom classification. Henceforth, today we divide the biological world into 5 kingdoms: kingdom Monera, kingdom Protista, kingdom Mycota, kingdom Plantae, and kingdom Animalia. Among these 3 kingdoms, Monera, Protista, Mycota, we are going to study in detail in this lesson. As the study of plant kingdom and animal kingdom is a bit more vast, we will be studying them in the 3rd and 4th lesson successively. So, let me start this lesson with our wonderful, colorful PPTs.
The slides and myself are clearly visible, and let me start my PPTs. Biological classification, lesson number 2. In the first lesson, we have studied the presence of wonderful biodiversity on this earth. That means there are wide varieties of plants, animals, and other organisms. Every individual plant, animal, or organism represents a particular species. Species is considered as basic unit of classification. Species refers to a group of organisms that are similar to each other and breed among themselves to produce a fertile offsprings. So there are wide varieties of organisms on this earth, which we call it as biodiversity. The number of organisms on this earth, as per today, is between 1.7 to 1.8 millions. And many organisms are identified, classified, and named every day. That means, in order to understand living organisms, in order to understand biodiversity, in order to understand life on earth, classification is essential, because studying all organisms togetherly is not possible. In order to make a scientific study of organisms, we have to scientifically classify them with the help of taxonomical aids. Classification is a process by which anything is grouped into convenient categories based on some easily recognized group, such as plant, animals, dogs, cats, or insects. How do we classify them? We have to consider some characters or criteria. For example, when you come to college, first PUC children will be categorized into Kannada medium students, English medium students, based on medium. Students who have opted for computer science, biology, like that we separate them based on some criteria. In the same way, We have to classify the organism considering some scientific criteria. Whenever we say plant, you will understand I am talking about autotrophic organisms, the organisms which produce their own food. Animals are heterotrophs. You can distinguish between a dog and a cat by its appearance, by its voice. That means classification is done by looking at their external morphological differences. So a group of organisms in a particular taxon have some characters that makes them same. Similarly, when we say mammals, in phylum Chordata, class Mammalia or mammals are there, which are different from fishes, amphibians, reptiles, birds. Because all the mammals, from rat to elephant, man to whale, all the mammals have some similarities such as presence of hairs on their body, presence of external ear called pinna, which are not seen in other chordate classes such as fishes, amphibians, reptiles and birds. So classification will be based on some characteristic features that will be scientific. Man is interested regarding classification of organisms right from his early days of civilization. During his evolution, the Stone Age man, the ancient man, in his caves we find the paintings of plants and animals of different varieties. That means man was interested about nature. His interest about nature, biodiversity is immense right from the early days of his evolution. But in those days, his scientific awareness was limited. So he used to classify the organisms based according to his requirements. Because man is dependent on nature. Nature is not dependent on man. You know that. Man is dependent on nature for food, shelter, clothing, medicines, and various other requirements. He was dependent, he is dependent, he will be dependent on nature for wide varieties of his day-to-day requirements. So in early days when man used to classify the organisms, he used to classify them non-scientifically, because he used to classify them as the organisms based on his requirements. For example, cat and a tiger, both fall under the same family, Felidae, you know that. But he used to consider cat is a domestic animal, let it be in the home. Useful. Lion is a harmful. Tiger is a harmful. So he used to separate them wide variety. Tulsi plant, useful. A palm tree, a fan palm, for example, not that much useful. So, He used to classify the plants and animals based upon his requirements, which used to be non-scientific because different varieties of organisms used to get separated. Even they have similarities. But gradually, his scientific awareness, his observation about the nature improved. And the first attempt of classification of organisms scientifically started by the attempt of Aristotle. Aristotle, we consider him as the father of biology. He made simple morphological characteristics observation of organisms, of both plants and animals. He classified plants based on their height as herbs, shrubs, and trees. A plant that grows up to 1 to 2 feet, herbs. A plant that grows up to 5 to 6 feet, shrubs. Above that, taller ones, the trees. Irrespective of their family, irrespective of their characters, he considered height as one of the criteria, which appears now, which is scientific as per now, but those days it was scientific attempt. Aristotle also classified animals. He classified the animals as the one that lives on land, in water, and that can fly in air. For him, an insect flying in air or a bird flying in air, both are same. Insect is an invertebrate, phylum Arthropoda. Bird is a chordate, which are totally different now. But according to Aristotle, both are same. He also classified the animals based upon the color of the blood. The animal having red blood and the animal having the blood which is colorless. Such observation he made, which is considered the first attempt of scientific classification of organisms. Aristotle, father of biology. This system of classification based on one or two morphological characters is called artificial system of classification. And they separate closely related organisms many a times, because they differ from each other in very few characters, and sometimes they bring two different organisms togetherly, which is now a non-scientific one. The classification as proposed by Aristotle is called artificial system because one or two visible characters are considered. This classification, which is also called as two kingdom classification, because until a microscope was invented, man had an idea that there are only two types of organisms on this earth: plants, animals. He had an idea about mushrooms also, which he added them into plant kingdom. Only after the invention of microscope, microorganisms were invented. Until then, there were only two kingdoms: Even Carolus Linnaeus, who is called father of taxonomy, we take his name with a lot of respect. Even today, Carolus Linnaeus, methods of classification based on hierarchy and method of naming of organism using two words, binomial nomenclature, is followed worldwide and will be followed. But even Carolus Linnaeus classified the organisms into two kingdoms: plants and animals. Plantae, animal kingdom; Animalia, animal kingdom. This system did not distinguish between eukaryotes and prokaryotes. Yes. Now we know that the organisms can be either prokaryotic or eukaryotic. What are prokaryotic organisms? The bacteria is called as a prokaryotic organism. Why? Because it has a prokaryotic cell. What is a prokaryotic cell? Inside the cell, the genetic material is not present inside the nucleus. There is no definite nuclear membrane. Such a cell is called prokaryotic cell, and the organism having such cell are called prokaryotic organisms. Whereas majority of the organisms are eukaryotic. They have the eukaryotic cell where the nucleoplasm and the cytoplasm are differentiated. They do not get mixed up due to presence of a definite nuclear membrane. So two kingdom classification did not consider this. The organisms having one cell are called unicellular. The organisms having more than one cell are called multicellular. Such observation were only possible after invention of microscope. Carolus Linnaeus, the greatest scientist ever walked on this earth, who made taxonomy possible, study of biodiversity easy, did not had a microscope. Why? Because that time microscope was not yet invented. So his method, two kingdom classification, fails to differentiate between prokaryotic organisms, eukaryotic organisms, unicellular organisms and multicellular organisms. Photosynthetic unicellular algae are there. Non-photosynthetic unicellular fungus, the yeast, they cannot be differentiated because they do not fall under plant kingdom or animal kingdom. Classification of organisms into plants and animals was easily done and was easy to understand, but a large number of organisms did not fall into either categories. Bacteria were discovered using microscope. Whether to put in a plant kingdom or animal kingdom, confusion. Protozoans, amoeba, euglena were discovered. Where to put them? Confusion. Fungi had no characters of either plant or animals. Where to put them? A confusion. So two kingdom classification utterly failed because of discovery of unicellular organisms, prokaryotic organisms, and better understanding of fungi. Hence, a two kingdom classification used for a long time was found inadequate, which started from Aristotle, went until Carolus Linnaeus. Later, people thought, no, We have to change it. There are technical problems regarding this two kingdom classification. A need was felt for including, besides gross morphology, just looking at the external appearance, plant, animal. Okay, put either this side or that side. Just looking the external morphology was no more convenient or enough. Other characteristics has to be considered, like the cellular details. Whether the cell has a cell wall or not, nuclear membrane or not, mode of nutrition, whether they are autotrophic, heterotrophic, saprophytic, habitat, where they live, in what condition they live, type of reproduction, whether asexual reproduction or sexual reproduction, and also their evolutionary relationship, phylogenetic relationship we call. All these characters has to be considered for classification. This was felt. So, two kingdom classification needed a major surgery. Classification system of the living organism have hence undergone several changes over time. Two kingdom classification shifted to three kingdom classification. Two kingdom, plant kingdom, animal kingdom. After having the microscope, people started getting the water from the pond, removing some tissue, scratching the skin and putting on the slide and observing. He started seeing various microorganisms, cellular details, smaller and smaller things he started seeing. He discovered there are various microorganisms, unicellular organisms. So another kingdom came into picture. Kingdom Protista. Along with plant and animal kingdom, kingdom Protista came into the picture. More and more advancement in technology resulted in inventing better and better, more powerful microscopes. He started observing the microorganism details much better. He discovered microorganisms, unicellular organisms, some are prokaryotic, some are eukaryotic. Then he felt, okay, prokaryotic cannot be added in kingdom Protista. So another kingdom came into picture, Monera. Plant kingdom, animal kingdom were there. Protista was added. Now comes Monera, which made four kingdom classification. The last one to be added was the fungi. R.H. Whittaker proposed five kingdom classification because he gave a separate status for the organisms which we call as fungi or mycota. Because they are special, they do have the unique characteristics, not of that of plant or animals. That means the method of classification keep on changing gradually from two kingdom to three kingdom to four kingdom to five kingdom we have come. Now you ask me, sir, is it lost? What is the guarantee that there will be no six kingdom classification? Possibility is there. Because if man discovers life in other planets, which is a major attempt, if we discover life on another planet, and if definitely they will be of different characters because of the conditions there, and they cannot be added in any of the existing five kingdoms. definitely another kingdom will come. But until today, we are following 5 kingdom classification as proposed by R.H. Whittaker. From 2 kingdom to 3 kingdom to 4 kingdom to 5 kingdom, kingdom plant and kingdom animal are there always. They are the basic one. They are not replaced and they will not be replaced. R.H. Whittaker proposed 5 kingdom classification called Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plantae and Animalia. The main criteria for classification used by R.H. Whittaker included cell structure, whether it is a prokaryotic or eukaryotic cell, whether the cell has a cell wall or not. Thallus organization, whether the body is divided into root system, shoot system or not. Mode of nutrition, whether it is autotrophic, heterotrophic or saprophytic. Reproduction and phylogenetic relation, evolutionary relationship. The monkey family, the primates, monkeys, apes, chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, human beings all fall under the same family because there is an evolutionary relationship. Such thing has to be also be considered. Considering all these criteria, 5 kingdom classification is been proposed and is considered to be more scientific until today. Dear children, see this chart, which is in your textbook also. 5 kingdom classification. 5 kingdom, kingdom Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plantae, Animalia are been mentioned there. And the characters, cell type, what type of cell is present in Monera? Prokaryotic. In Protista, Fungi, Plantae and Animalia, what type of cell is present? Eukaryotic is present. Cell wall, how it is present? In animal kingdom, the animals have the cells without cell wall. Cell membrane is the limiting membrane. Nuclear membrane in prokaryotic, in kingdom Monera, nuclear membrane is absent, whereas in the remaining 4 kingdom, nuclear membrane is present. Body organization. How it is there, whether they are unicellular or multicellular. Mode of nutrition, whether they produce their own food or they dependent on others. All these characters have been mentioned in a single chart. Dear friends, please make a note. In the textbook, this chart is present. Study this chart carefully and try to write the definition of all the terms: prokaryotic, eukaryotic, cellular, multicellular, autotrophic, heterotrophic, saprophytic. What they are, try to write all the meanings and definition of these terms. Study this chart thoroughly. In my next video, when I continue the class, I will start from this chart only. Until then, please take very good care of yourself, children. God bless you. Thank you.